Ladies and gentlemen, when as passengers we buy an air ticket in India, a good chunk of what we pay goes towards ensuring that when we get to an airport, we are not inconvenienced. That our elderly parents don't have to walk for 20 minutes. That pregnant women get the buggy without having to wait for it for 20 minutes. That those with mobility challenges are not handicapped with accessibility issues. So when an elderly couple brought an Air India ticket from New York to Mumbai, they paid every fee possible to ensure that they reach home safely. A user development fee, an airport development fee, a passenger service fee, a passenger handling fee as well. And yet, when they landed, something as basic as a wheelchair was not made available to them. They had pre-booked it. Via their ticket cost, they had even paid for it. And yet, there was just one wheelchair for this elderly couple, both in their 80s. Now, this is a common enough story at airports across India, but this one had a tragic ending. The gentleman insisted that his wife use the one wheelchair that was available and decided to walk alongside her. After 1.5 kilometers, he collapsed at the Mumbai airport, had a heart attack and died. 50,000 rupees for a ticket, ladies and gentlemen, and the journey ends in death because the airline and the airport don't have a wheelchair for you. What is the point of having world-class airports with art galleries and luxury lounges and meditation zones if you don't have something as basic as wheelchairs? Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a country where 20% of our population is mobility challenged. And yet, you cannot calculate how many wheelchairs your airport or your aircraft or your airline will need. In its response, Air India has offered the customary lip service, calling it an unfortunate incident. They claim that the elderly couple was asked to wait because of a high demand for wheelchairs. But the 80-year-old decided to walk alongside his wife, who was in a wheelchair. Essentially, they are saying the senior citizen was responsible for what happened. We had told him to wait. Ladies and gentlemen, after a certain age, when you're traveling with your family, you want to stick with your family. Any professional who has worked in the airline industry will tell you that most elderly couple want to stick together for obvious reasons. And then you're blaming the gentleman for making the decision of walking alongside with his wife. He had to walk because you didn't have a wheelchair for him. Reports say that the flight had requests for 32 wheelchairs. So in that flight from New York to Mumbai, there was a request from 32 passengers for wheelchairs. But when the flight landed, there were only 15 available. One reason also being given, according to reports, is that the flight was almost 10 hours late. Well, the flight was 10 hours late because of you. And if the flight is 10 hours late, it doesn't mean that the 34 people who need wheelchairs will not get it. Look at this. The airline knows beforehand that 34 wheelchairs are needed, but they send only 15. What are those with mobility challenges to do? Wait for an hour or 2 hours for the wheelchair to come. Is this why we pay passenger service fee? The DGCA, the aviation regulatory body, as always is waking up late. They've issued a show cause notice to Air India now for violating rules and has also asked the airline to submit a report in a week's time. According to DGCA rules that already exist, airlines are mandated to address the specific needs of individuals, ensuring their seamless travel from the departure terminal to the aircraft and vice versa upon arrival. Today, the DGCA has also issued an advisory to all airlines to ensure that adequate number of wheelchairs are available to passengers who require assistance. Did it really have to take a death for you to issue this advisory? Fact is, despite clear rules in place and similar advisories in the past, airports are handicapped when it comes to wheelchairs. Take a look at what had happened a few days ago. Para-athlete Suvarna Raj was denied a wheelchair at the Chennai airport. He's also alleging that he was ill-treated for requesting a personal wheelchair. In October last year, again at the Mumbai airport, a disabled business class flyer was denied a wheelchair and was forced to walk down the ramp without help. Again, Chennai airport. Early last year, actor and politician Khushbu Sundar, she had suffered a knee injury, was made to wait for half an hour before a wheelchair arrived, and that too had to be borrowed from another airline. The data is clear. We are getting this data from the 2011 census. It says that 20%, in fact, more than 20% Indians in India need a wheelchair. This includes those who are disabled and those who are beyond a certain age. If the statistics are so clear, why are our airports perpetually short of wheelchairs? Is it money, lack of money, or is it because they simply don't care? Let me go across to my guest with that question. Jitendra Bhargava is a former ED of Air India joining us on the broadcast. Abha Khetrapal is president of the Cross the Hurdles and Disability Right Activist, and Aman Mudgar is director, Gilco Global. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us. Abha Khetrapal, can I ask you for your first reaction on what happened at the Mumbai airport? Look, wheelchairs not being available is a common enough story. But this one ended in death, and the airline and the airport should have known better.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's like it's really scary. If I think of myself or anybody else, my parents who are traveling, it's really scary to listen to such stories, and it demotivates us to travel. Now I am scared whether I should travel by an airplane or not. I myself am a wheelchair user, so it is really scary. We every every now and then we hear when we get our wheelchairs back, when we deplane, when we get, sometimes it is like damaged. What do? We don't have any option. We just have to wait for hours and hours. So it's really scary, and it's so unfortunate that in this, like, in the modern age, when we say that we are civilized and we are modern, we are becoming third or fourth largest economy in the world. So like it's ironical. It's my first reaction. Like it
Abha,
sends
can I
shiver
ask you?
to my spine.
Can I ask you then? Can I ask you, as someone who's a wheelchair user, now many wheelchair users do carry their own personal wheelchairs, but there are those who don't. As someone who maybe sometimes doesn't carry your own wheelchair, what is the general experience of those who are mobility challenged and don't carry their own wheelchairs at airports?
Yeah, many times I've heard that they don't get wheelchairs. But sometimes what happens is that people, in order to like make navigate smoothly through the airport and the procedures, they just ask for a wheelchair just because they would get wheelchair assistance even if they can walk. I have seen many people. So what happens is that the people
Yeah.
who really need it, they remain devoid of the wheelchairs.
You make a good point, and I'll get Jitendra Bhargava in here. Jitendra Bhargava, we know this. We've all seen it, that there are people who don't have mobility issues, but just because it's easier to get onto a wheelchair, people ask for that wheelchair, and therefore wheelchairs invariably fall short. But Jitendra Bhargava, nothing at all can excuse the fact that an 80-year-old is denied a wheelchair. He walks for 1.5 kilometers, has a heart attack and dies. Nothing on earth can wipe away the sins of the airline and the airport in this case.
Shreya, first, condolences to the family who lost their 80-year-old family member. Having said this, you made a statement earlier in your opening remarks that they're paid for it. The reality is, wheelchair is not paid for. There was a decade ago when passengers were asked to submit a medical certificate and also pay for it. DGCA had the airline withdraw this charge. Now, the preceding speaker very rightly said many people ask for wheelchair because it's easy to get navigated and through an escort reach the terminal outside. Very often it happens. You can have the video coverage from the airport and you will see how fast they run the moment they are out of the airport and from a wheelchair. It happens. So you also made a very pertinent remark. DGCA always wakes up after the episode has happened. Now, this is the time when it makes it into a case study and said we need to have a legitimacy for requirement of wheelchair. You cannot have unlimited number of wheelchairs because every wheelchair needs a staffer. Don't forget this. There are multiple flights arriving simultaneously in the night from various destinations, not just of Air India, of all international airlines. How many wheelchairs are going to have at the airport? So basically, anybody who requires a wheelchair must get it. Repeat, must get it. But a person who does not require it should be denied, and conditions should be created that you can clearly segregate the two, the legitimate people, illegitimate people who don't need it kind of a thing. Then comes the question of airlines.
Mr. Bhargav,
Yes.
Mr. Bhargav, can I ask you this? You tell me that we are not paying for the wheelchairs we ask for. What is the passenger convenience fee? What is the passenger handling fee? What is the airport development fee? Why am I paying all these fees and charges as part of my ticket if something as basic as a wheelchair is not available to my 80-year-old father who clearly needs it and who has pre-booked it?
Please trust our airline man when he's talking about it. These are charges applicable to all passengers, whether they're demanding wheelchair or not wheelchair. Now, these kind of costings are not included in it. Please remember this. Now, wheelchair was a specific charge because a certain number of passengers need it. Not everybody needs it. If you remember the theory of the government policy in 2012, when the prices were unbundled, you pay for the services you use and do not pay for the service you do not use. So that's where the user fee is a totally different thing that we're talking about. Now, wheelchair charge was a different one. When I was working, this was done. It was done away with. So what we need to do is, as I said earlier, people who need it must get it, and there should be no kind of leeway available, discretion available with an airline. You ought to give a person. But let's get the legitimacy right. DGCA should put in something that anybody who needs it will get it. You can't have 200 wheelchairs, the 200 people at the airport. In the night hours, multiple flights arrive from different destinations of different airlines. And let's also not forget,
Mr. Bhargav,
as the people start living longer, they travel more, and India is a growing aviation market, the requirement will go. So all the more reason why DGCA should step in and create a policy as to who should get a wheelchair and who should not.
So, Mr. Bhargav, I don't think you need to create a policy for an airline to know that an 80-year-old or an 84-year-old needs a wheelchair, right? I don't think you need a policy for that. Number two, आप बोल रहे हैं that if we start paying for wheelchairs, they will be available to the people who need it the most. And these free wheelchairs, and you're calling them free and I'm not calling them free, will not be misused. Mr. Jitendra Bhargava, fact is, of course, Air India has not put this information out, but it has been out in various... एक मिनट, सर नहीं, सुन लीजिए. I'm saying the airline has admitted that pre-landing, there were 34 requests. There were requests by 34 passengers for these wheelchairs from that one particular aircraft. Then how is it that only 15 are available? You knew that 34 are required, irrespective of whether it's a legitimate need or an illegitimate need. You knew 34 were required. You send in only 15, and then you say, oh, poor guy, we are very sorry. This happened to the elderly gentleman. But we had asked him to wait.
No, Shreya, look, let's put it this way. Airline did not have fault with the airline. I would concede that. Passenger was asked to wait while they arranged the wheelchair. Let's not also forget, an 80-year-old person, just imagine the reality. 16 hours of flight, plus 2 hours of ground time at the New York. And if he was coming from another city in New York, more time added to it. Look at the strain. It should have been very clear, number one, wheelchair is not available. Airlines have the buggies available. Why was he made to walk, or even if he decided to walk on his own? Somebody should have organized a buggy for him. These golf carts are available plenty at the airport. Organize that, and a buggy can go along with it, or both of them could have been on it. Because you're basically avoiding the walk and the physical strain. I could fully agree on it. That once you get the legitimacy right, ensure that you get it, and the onus should be on the airline to provide it. But you can only get legitimate thing when you put in a token charge on it, because then nobody would pay for it and say, okay, I don't deserve it, I don't need it, but I'm paying for it.
Yes, firstly, I would like to, I think, offer my deepest condolences. Firstly.
Okay.
Yes, with the family.
Go ahead, Aman.
And I feel it is a really sorry and a tragic event. And the sorry part is that this could have been prevented. I will partly agree with Mr. Bhargav on one front. I feel that the societal mindset is pivotal. Infrastructure deficiency obviously is a consequence, because usually I think I come from infrastructure background. So even right from designing to procurement, my observation has been that while redundancy is infused while designing facilities, minimum benchmarks are usually being followed when they are creating the enabling infrastructure for the disabled. So I feel that maybe it is the societal mindset has to be more inclusive. And yes, obviously, the procurement and the operations or the SOPs which are created by the airlines or the ground operations has to be more sensitive. And obviously, people also, when we see the passengers, they also have to be sensitive enough in terms of prioritization. If there is somebody who's more in need of a wheelchair, then the other person should be himself or herself conscious enough.
No, I agree with you there, actually. I agree with you there. If you are seeing an elderly person who is having to walk because you have a slight injury and you are taking the wheelchair, the decent thing to do, the civilized thing to do would be for someone to vacate that wheelchair and give it to the elderly person. But the fact is, who are we to decide? Maybe someone has a knee injury. Maybe someone has a broken bone. There could be 100 other reasons.
Infrastructure
there could be 100 other reasons. Who are we to decide? But
infrastructure
but
is
Abba,
deficient.
my point is, if I'm asking, the infrastructure of course is deficient, but Abba, what I'm asking is, if I feel the need for a wheelchair, the airline should be in a position to offer that to me. This is not such a big deal.
Yeah, and
I'm not asking for the sun and the moon and the stars.
Moreover, the staff, the ground staff and the airline staff, they should be well sensitized, like how to communicate. If they are deficient in wheelchairs, they need to communicate beforehand. Means before, like when the deplaning happens, it should be communicated well to the passengers that they need not panic, they need to wait, and prioritizing according to the medical conditions. If a person has this gentleman, and very sorry to hear this, but the 80-year-old man, he must have been like in the need of rest, as he had traveled for such a long distance. So prioritization should be there according to the medical condition, which should be well communicated beforehand to the airlines.
Okay. Jitendra Bhargava, I'll give you the last, I'll give you the last word here on the show. The DGCA is just about issuing, I don't know what it's called, and I think it is an advisory. I don't know how else to categorize it. It says carriage by air, persons with show cause, disability, and or persons with reduced mobility, again listing out facts that you need to ensure that their travel is seamless, and this is a show cause notice that has been issued and the airline has to reply within 7 days. Further, an advisory has also been issued to all airlines to ensure that an adequate number of wheelchairs is available to passengers. But my point is, ye pehli baar hua hai kya? That the DGCA is waking up now and issuing this advisory, and why should they have to issue an advisory at all when the rules are very clear?
Shreya, DGCA has always done this. Something happens, and the only thing they do is, in a bureaucratic manner, send a letter out to the airline. As I said earlier, DGCA should take this opportunity of framing rules and regulations. You cannot have unlimited number of wheelchair requirements with an attendant at the airport and then getting on to service the passengers.
Okay.
Let there be legitimacy made into it. The rule was there about 15 years ago, a token sum of money to be paid, medical certificate here. So you have the bifurcation of very clearly done. They need the wheelchair and they must get it. And those people who are just using it, misusing the facility because they want to be escorted out with their heavy baggages, etc., with an escort and the wheelchair, they should be denied this. Now that's the way to resolve an issue. And I'm sure when Air India answers the show cause notice, they will put in the full perception, the clear picture of what we've seen is at the airport, and then perhaps a decision can come in. But the tragedy that's happened at the airport could have been avoided. As I said earlier, it's not just wheelchair. The person was in a position to walk. He could have been given a buggy, the golf cart that's available, and that keep running between up and down, taking the passengers on. Somebody should have been sensitive. One of the speakers very rightly said, the staff have to be sensitized. Somebody sees an old man walking and not walking the way a normal person does. Stop him with that, say, so we are organizing a buggy for you to take you there. Now, something needed to be done. Now, if lessons can be learned out of this thing, the purpose would have been served, but not the way that said, okay, ye to aaj ho gaya hai, ab agli baar hoga tab dekhenge. That attitude should not be allowed to work. And I'm glad you've taken up this issue and let there be attention drawn to the government and the bureaucracy that something needs to be done and post haste.
You know, and as we speak of the government and the DGCA, the airlines and the airports will be well served if they immediately, without wasting even a minute, order more wheelchairs for the airport. It's as simple as that. Till your rules come in place, till you see how legitimacy is to be incorporated, etc. Just bring in those wheelchairs. They're not that expensive. Mr. Bhargava, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Abha Ketrapal, thank you very much for joining us. And Aman, thank you very much for being with us here on the show as well.